You are listening to Neurosalience, the OHBM podcast.
All right. Thanks for coming. And I'd just like to introduce that this new podcast, the OHBM podcast. We don't really have a name for it yet, but the idea has been bubbling around for years to start a podcast for OHBM to basically interview people in OHBM and related to OHBM about aspects, either research or topics or areas of controversy or interest, and to sort of keep people on top of sort of how we're all thinking. And also it's to hopefully be entertaining. So I'm Peter Bandettini. I'm the host of this podcast. And today for our very first podcast, our podcast doesn't have a name yet, but we will come up with one. Today at this podcast, for this first podcast, we'll be talking about a new publishing platform for OHBM called Aperture. And it's been a long time coming, and it's been in the works. We're trying to figure out the platform, figure out the goals of it, the details. And also, I have to mention that I'll be involved in this discussion as well, since I was part of the starting out of the publishing platform. So, but today we have three guests who are the key players in getting Aperture started. And like I said, I've been involved with working with it as well. So to begin, we have Jean-Baptiste Poline from McGill University. We have Tonya White, who is the editor-in-chief of Aperture from Erasmus University. And we have Kay Vanda, who's the editorial manager of Aperture, who works with OHBM, basically with Global Management Partners, the company that organizes OHBM. And she's our key person for sort of helping out with all the administrative parts of Aperture. So let's just sort of, maybe I'll just go around and you can introduce yourselves. So let's start with JB.
Hi, I'm very pleased to be on that podcast. It's just been so fun and so long, as Peter was saying. It's been a very long journey for Aperture to come into life. So I work at McGill University, and I'm an associate professor over there. I do brain imaging methods. I work also on infrastructures. How do we propose new tools and ways of processing and ways of hosting data, and I've been working on trying to sort of like ease the process of doing research. So how do you get access to data more easily, get access to pipelines more easily, how do those sort of things, as well as a little bit of a biostatistical aspects in brain imaging. And yes, I think Aperture was one of the dreams that I had that finally, with the help of many people, is coming to life, and I'm super happy to be at that stage now. Thank you.
Okay, all right, Tonya.
Hello, everyone. It's very nice to be here on this first podcast for OHBM. It's a great group of people who are put together Aperture and getting it going. From background, I'm an associate professor at Erasmus University Medical Center in Rotterdam in the Netherlands. My focus was called Pediatric Population Neuroimaging, which is the intersection between epidemiology, which is in the news a lot now with the COVID issues, but epidemiology and developmental neuroscience, you could say. So large-scale neuroimaging in pediatric populations to better understand exposures, for example, exposures during prenatal life and downstream effects on the brain, or emerging psychopathology, or typical development, and also involved in methods, various methods development. And I'm excited to be the Aperture, the first Aperture Editor-in-Chief. And I like what, when we were discussing with some of the handling editors, what Cameron Craddock said when he said, "It seems like you're building an airplane while you're flying," which is what we're doing. But I am extraordinarily optimistic.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll keep it in flight as it's taking off. But also your background, I always like to note that, your background is, you got your bachelor's in electrical engineering as well. So you're not apart from the technical side of things as well. So.
Yes, I did my bachelor's in electrical engineering and my master's as well in electrical engineering at Illinois. And at the time that I was at Illinois, Paul Lauterbur was there. So.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. Now Paul Lauterbur, he still has his first magnet in the basement of University of Illinois as well. I had a chance to see that a couple of years ago. So Kay, like to introduce yourself as well.
Sure. Hi, thank you, Peter. Yes, I'm Kay Vanda. I am sort of the journal editorial manager of Aperture. I came in to this project in January and was, so thrilled to see it launch in October. My role really is just sort of administrative communications management, getting submissions from A to B, really. So it's very exciting.
Okay, thank you. And you're based, you're based in Minnesota right now with the rest of the Global Management Partners sort of central offices. So, okay. And I guess we're all based at our houses right now during COVID, but so I want to just get started with the whole idea of Aperture. So this might be more of a question for JB. So what's really the timeline of when it actually sort of started in your mind and how it slowly got off the ground?
Oh, I don't know if my memory goes back to that time, but I do remember when we were in Puerto Rico, where at some stage we were hoping to have OHBM in Puerto Rico, and then the Zika virus. There was another virus at the time, so I think it was let me see, 2016 probably. And we had this, we were thinking and there was a bunch of people, and I think I remember Nico Krieger-Scotter was there, and Tom Nichols was there, and you, Peter, I think you were there, and Michael Gresham, and a number of people were, around, and really, it was it was also at the time where there was a lot of bad feeling with Elsevier, you remember the time when Elsevier was actually lobbying the Congress such that you couldn't actually have an open access to your PubMed PDFs, so publication funded by NIH you would have to pay again somehow, the public money would have to be put again to access those. So we are thinking why do we and basically having a traditional journal is not very expensive in some ways. Everything is now online. You don't need the printers and all those things. So that was one motivation, and oh yes, and Martin was there as well. Martin Lindquist was one of the big proponents of this. And so that was one of the motivation, was a bit like a reaction against the system that we thought was not entirely fair or adequate. It was a bit of a too much of a power given to some companies. And the other motivation is that I was thinking it's incredible that we value a lot the story of what the results and the and the narrative of those results, and we don't value that much what the building blocks of those things, and the data sets, the pipelines, the actual work. And as classical saying now, isn't like the actual scholarship is often in the code, and is often in the rather than just the narrative of it. I mean, obviously it's in both, but yeah. But there was also this feeling that if you have a PhD student, and that PhD student is working on like a package to analyze data and things like that, this could be a very, very high value for the community, but very, very little value for that PhD student. And often I would hear PIs saying, "Hey, you should really not work on that package really that much. You should really publish things and put PDF on, and that really was like a bit of a thinking, okay, that's really inefficient for our research. Like we do need to value those objects." And so part of the motivation for Aperture was how do we value those things much more, and how do we create a place where those things will be valued and well recognized, and you can be sort of like extremely happy and proud of publishing those things. And so that was.
So that's how it sort of started in 2016. I remember when you talked to me. I believe it was in Singapore in. What was that, 2018 or
18 was Vancouver.
Vancouver, yeah, 17. And that's where you sort of asked me to help out. And I said I was happy to help out because I actually also believed in that. I was sort of just ramping down from being editor-in-chief of Neuroimage, and I still felt sort of this drive to want to help out with a totally different publishing platform. So I got on board. But yeah, and actually this sort of leads into so you asked me. Yeah,
I was also in Puerto Rico, and I remember.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, no, I remember one of the things that was discussed was about the publishing platform is the best practices, and the question is, why couldn't we have our own platform as well for publishing the best practices? That's one of the things I remember. There may have been, regarding the memory, we might have been some alcohol involved, who knows?
Some of the best ideas start out with a little bit of... Yeah, so, and it definitely, that sort of leads into the next question of sort of what needs it fills. As both of you are saying, is that it's sort of along the lines of, you have your bits and before we're sort of closed and there was a paywall and things like that, but also just the idea that more of a mechanism for sharing code and sharing data and writing about that, and sort of the open access sort of taken to the extreme to help catalyze the field, to help papers. It's sort of unfortunate that people, the result of all this research is just papers, but people read them and then they have to, if they want to reproduce it or do anything with it, they have to start from scratch or go through other mechanisms. So this is hopefully catalyzing that. Okay, so let's take it forward a little bit further. We sort of started talking about this at OHBM a little bit, making some announcements that we're going to get going, and then it was just JB and I initially, and then we sort of were starting to think about who's going to be involved in this, and I don't know, JB, do you want to talk a little bit about and then obviously that we were totally lucky to that Tonya agreed to be editor-in-chief, because I think that you're the perfect sort of combination of the clinical side, the research side, the philosophy of sort of open access, and so we spent a long time last year finding people for the jobs. I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit, JB.
Cool. I think Aperture will be really well served with Tonya, because as you said, Peter, it's like, the fact that you have, Tonya, that you have those two backgrounds are, I think it's critical for our field in general, that having the technical and the kind of clinical knowledge is fantastic for our community. And also, I think, Tonya, you've always been also involved in the kind of open access, open source, open and hackathon sort of like, initiative, and the Open Science SIG generally. So I've seen you in the Open Science SIG hackathons quite a few times, and you were always like, being involved there. And I think that's part of the Aperture kind of a genotype, is a bit in that community as well. And with, like recognizing all the work that has been done by, people like Pierre Bellec, Cameron Craddock, and many others. And I don't want to cite too many, because it's a very long list of but I think that's sort of like a community has shaped a bit and changed a bit the way we're doing neuroimaging and science in our field. And I think Aperture has some a little bit of that history as well for you, Tonya. So I just wanted to recognize that as well. It's a third thing that you have as well. It's fantastic.
Thanks. And the hackathons, which I think, I don't know, I remember from council, you've been a strong proponent of the hackathons, and promoting the open science community has been a tremendous benefit within OHBM. So I've taken PhD students to the hackathons, and it's just a fabulous way to be introduced to a different part of the organization of human brain mapping, a more smaller, people work together, you sit in small groups, and it's an open, friendly, and very diverse and inclusive environment.
Yeah. So actually, I just so the whole development reminds me of so it takes me back to also this meeting that Tonya was at as well. Before we even had any sort of clear idea of who's going to be editor or whatever, we were meeting in Montreal. And that was a kind of a early meeting. It was an interesting meeting. JB hosted that, and there were other people involved, and Tonya was there, and we were meeting with a person, Adam Hyde, who's with Coco. That was one potential platform that we were discussing with him. I don't know if you wanted to talk about how that meeting got going, and so that was interesting, because we were throwing around all kinds of ideas, and we met with Adam, and then we continued on as trying to figure out actually how to get it going, and we ultimately decided to go with Attendee Interactive. But I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that, your experience at that meeting. That I remember Tonya was coming up with a lot of different ideas, and we were all sort of brainstorming as far as there.
There was I think those sort of things happened a little bit organically, right? One of the and starting Aperture with Attendee Interactive was the right decision, because we needed to get started, and we needed, and I don't think we had an alternative way of doing it that was viable. At the same time, I always had in mind that if we could have an open source platform that could be sort of like looked at and possibly embellished or improved, or by open source developers, that that we do have a lot of really excellent open source developers in our community. I thought that would be a good thing for we won't be tied into to some specific product, and we could more be freer in some ways in what we want of that platform to be. So that has not happened yet, but it may happen hopefully soon. we are actually working with the Collaborative Knowledge Foundation and Adam Hyde and to see how we can make their developments useful for Aperture. And I like also the fact that this group has been working on open source development of a publishing platform for a while. They've worked with eLife, they worked with Indawi, they worked with like a number of the California Data Library. I think they so they do have like the experience of those developments, and hopefully we'll deliver something good for the community and for the neuroscience community. As you said, Tonya, this is really like again a bit like flying the plane while you so we are definitely we'll have hiccups, we'll have like a little bumps in the road, but the general direction seems to be good and hopeful for the future. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. But that was a fun meeting. We were trying to find out a bit who we were, and and it was really coming from the fact that I just want to mention that before Aperture there was this committee, OHBM committee. It was called the Topic, the OHBM Publishing Initiative Committee, and I think that's a lot of was like a thought and brainstorm at that level as well before. But yeah, that was one of the this in-person meeting that I think I remember well, and I'm really grateful that you came actually, Tonya and Peter, because that made a huge change, a huge impact on the project.
Yeah, that was an important meeting. Nicola Stikov was involved as well, I think, and yeah, so it was. But we finally decided to go with Attendee Interactive, because it just practically we had to get something going right away. And Attendee Interactive, as most of the OHBM community knows, it sort of handles the abstract submission for OHBM, and so they had some sort of structure in place. And OHBM has a great relationship with Attendee Interactive, and so they're going to get us off. They got us off the ground, and now we're flying, and we're trying to figure out, and we've sort of talked with them about maybe trying, we pushed them pretty hard to try to figure out how we can be more flexible and open access and whatever. And at some point, that's not what they do. They're not they're not a journal or a publishing platform company. So we're moving in another direction that we'll eventually go to, but we're not quite there yet. So, but yeah, so Tonya, so when we asked you, we were really happy that you said yes. And so what was your thought process in taking this on? Obviously, it's a lot of work, and it might, it's potentially a black hole of work, but it's also something that we have a team of people that can help and we can manage. And so, what was your thought process as far as accepting this?
Well, the thought process was this. I've been active in OHBM since my first meeting in 2000. And I've been on council. I had the Diversity and Gender Committee, but then hadn't been doing anything for a while. And I actually was going through my mind, what should I do next? So I was thinking, should I try and join up on the program committee or run for a different office in council? What should I do? And then this opportunity came. And so I was at a point where I was already thinking, what can I do? What can I do for the OHBM community? Because it does feel, it is my major meeting. It's my community. I go there. I really have, in the virtual world now, have really missed not being there and interacting with people over coffee and discussing science and going to the talks and all that. So I decided, we had a discussion with you, Peter, and with JB, and I read through the material, and I had certain questions, and then I just, I said, okay, I'll be a test pilot, I guess. Actually, the key things for me was what was told with respect to the journal itself. So one is that it's backed by OHBM, which was really, really important for me, because if it's coming from OHBM, it's coming from a great organization, and they're going to support it. And that was really key for me. The second is that they wanted quality material. So I get all these emails about submit to our journal, submit to this journal. And I didn't want Aperture to be one of these ones. I want it to be a sort of predatory journal. I don't want it to be a predatory journal. I want it to be, this is a neuroimaging paper. This is a paper focused on neuroscience or computational or something. Aperture would fit. And then the fact that it's open science, low cost. I'm stealing some of the thunder from JB, who's going to, and you, Peter, who's talking about the major points about Aperture. I mean, the OHBM community-driven and high quality. Those aspects resonated with me. There's still issues that we have to address. There's many issues. I say flying a plane in the air. Maybe it's riding a bike while you're building it, because it's not really dangerous. I mean, nothing really bad is going to happen. And we bike a lot here in the Netherlands. So maybe it's more like building a bike while you're riding it. It will go, and it will be good. It's going to take some time, and it's teamwork. So we've put together a great team of handling editors, and I was extraordinarily impressed that many of the handling editors were really excited to be a part of that. And we're building our editorial board as well, which is still in the process, which hope to include the handling editors to help foster who they think would be good as part of the editorial board. So it's a great team.
Yeah. So let's talk about that in a second. So just to clarify the relationship between Aperture and OHBM. So, OHBM supports Aperture not only in spirit, but also they're providing the funding for Aperture to sort of get started. The hope then is that we'll be self-sustaining. We're charging a little bit for people to actually publish articles, and at some point we'll be self-sustaining. We're also looking at grants and things like that. But OHBM definitely has Aperture's back. It's not totally, like you said. It's not dangerous, or it's not like you can almost sense that OHBM is sort of holding the bike up a little bit, and as it goes along. I don't know if you want to...
Definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely like an OHBM sort of driven project. I should also say that some of the some of the grant money things I've actually contributed. I mean, some other projects have also contributed to the enterprise. So it's to me, it's one of the phenotype of the project. It is community driven, and OHBM is really the catalyst, is organizing and something. But it's a community driven project. Hopefully, I like the fact that OHBM is electing its council. So if you don't like how Aperture is going, you can change things. Elections, we know, are important, and so that's I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah. So let's first talk about the people involved before we start talking about the specific topics and types of papers and platforms or publishing objects. The people involved. So JB and I and Tonya have been brainstorming for trying to get editorial board and editors and whatnot. So and Kay has certainly been helping out with. Let's just pause for a second and mention Kay, because Kay has been absolutely critical in all these phases. Right from the start, when Kay started, she was the person who helped keep us organized in terms of finding people and sending out emails to people and arranging these meetings. We've been meeting every week almost regarding Aperture, and Kay's been doing an amazing job with all these Google Docs and all these and everything, just sort of keeping us organized. So Kay, how's that been for you? Was this what you expected when you signed on?
Oh, goodness. Yeah, I can honestly say when I started in January, it was just sort of staffing the Aperture Oversight Committee. So JB is the chair, Peter is the chair-elect of that committee. It's about 12 or 14 OHBM members. And my idea of Aperture, what this journal was really formed from so many great notes taken over the years in this compilation of a Google Doc of there was that meeting summary that they were talking about with Coco and all of these different ideas, and then what open access and open source, all these different notes of that. And so I took these notes and sort of came up with this operations plan, working with JB, working with Peter, working with the Aperture Oversight Committee of what this journal could look like. And yeah, it's been very, very challenging, very, very rewarding. I came from a science writing background, so I did a lot of writing about science and different studies. So the management and administrative side of it has been good. It's been good.
Okay, well, good. Hopefully you'll right. So you're even becoming more engaged over time. So that's really totally useful. And once the papers start flowing in, your work will even increase further, I'm sure. But let's talk. Let's talk a little bit about the types of topics that Aperture covers, as far as what are the types of papers or publishing objects. So all along, JB is saying this isn't a journal. We don't publish. We're not publishing papers. It's a publishing platform for publishing research objects. And what does that mean, JB? So let's just clarify what we're looking for.
Yes. So again, so the idea is, how do we make our research as useful and as reusable as possible? I think that's the goal of the and also how do we recognize work that is not well recognized but critical for the advancement of the field. And so the idea was to make sure that we are not only publishing PDF and narrative, but we are publishing research objects that have some usefulness and as Tonya was mentioning, high quality things, so things that stand out in the community. So what kind of things can we publish? So I would say first things come in mind, like obviously the narrative is important. That's one. It doesn't. We're not taking that away at all. But the data, and we all know that if we can replay our method, our a research on another data set, we're really going to sort of increase the solidity and the generalizability of results. So I think that's one aspect. So data are really a first citizen object. Alongside some journals are actually specialized in publishing data, the scientific data from the Nature Spring Up publishing is specialized in that. So Aperture definitely wants to have that capacity of publishing data. And how do we do this? How do we review those things? All those questions. And then again, code pipelines, notebooks, computational notebooks are a second big item where. As I was saying, we really, I think, there's a lot of scholarship in the code, and the amount of time that people spend in making code clean, tested, solid, able to evolve quickly, to answer. This is absolutely critical. It's a huge amount of time. So having a place where you can recognize those things as very high values, very, very relevant and useful for the community is always one other thing. But there's also other things thinking of Nicola and Stikov and and all the educational aspects. There's a lot of fantastic work being pushed into making courses and making like a educational and training material, and very high quality training material is also something that is extremely important for our community. Very, very important. And so I think recognizing those things and reviewing and saying, this is a super high quality one. We really want to make sure that this is well seen as that all the time and effort that have been put and expertise that have been put in these things should be recognized as well as a great finding, or so that was so I've mentioned those three things, but I'm sure there will be hybrid objects and other things that may come up along the year. So I think we will be very open to anything that the community thinks is really useful and really important for the advancement of science.
Yeah, and Tonya, as editor-in-chief, I mean, obviously you have the final say for a lot of these things and the way the direction of the journal of the publishing platform is going. Certainly JB and I are sort of helping out behind the scenes, but what's your vision of that? Do you have anything to add as far as what you'd like to see and how it fits in?
I can only echo what JB said. So high quality. So some of the submissions I expect will be very similar to submissions that go to typical journals. There'll be code that'll be reviewed, and we're discussing what is the best way to review code and to make sure everything's working and so the one of the challenges in everything that we do is that the people who are asking to review, this is not their job. They're doing it for free, and just like I guess all of us on this call, except Kay is being paid, fortunately, because she's doing a lot, but all of us are doing this for free. So this is in addition to all our other work. And so the reviewers who are, and the handling editors and the editorial board who are doing this work will be testing it and looking at it. So the aspects of code and educational content. And I think I mentioned earlier that was one of the best practices, was one of the initial conversations that prompted, I think, Aperture said, can we have a place where we can publish these best practices works where it's our own, it's OHBM, so to speak. And then there's the option to be creative. So one of the things, so we diversity and inclusivity is possible. I'm also considering the possibility of some having one edition a year that taps into this whole area of the combination between education and art, because the art and whether we could have, like just before the meeting, some type of submissions that are a compilation of people using art and text in order to educate about the brain. And then being flexible, I would say.
Okay. So
I just want to say one other thing, if I could, that I've had papers, and probably other people have had papers that have been rejected from the standpoint of, this is just an incremental finding. It just is an incremental extension of what we already know. And or it's a replication, and therefore it's rejected. And one of the things is, if it's good quality and it's replication, or if it's an incremental advancement, the main point is the quality. I think these things are very important, especially in imaging world where there's an element of noise in which sometimes the noise is higher than the signal, and what you're producing is noise that has a hard time being replicated. And so I really would love to see replication and actually good quality negative studies in which a power analysis is done so that you can show this is the effect had there been a finding, because it's harder to some extent to publish negative findings. But I also would very much like good quality negative findings. If everyone's looking at what they published, if everyone's publications are only positive, that to me says something about, well, your hypotheses are always right. My hypotheses, I think about a 10% rate of negative papers that I publish, 10 to 12%, and that's probably too low.
Yeah. Sometimes we learn the most from our hypotheses that are wrong, and it's nice to have a platform that highlights those as well.
And I think we should also talk at some point in time about pre-registration, about integrating that.
So, yeah, exactly. So, so I was about to get into a discussion about reviewing code, but before I do that, so why don't you outline? We've talked a lot about the whole process of submitting a paper and reviewing it. So I don't know if you wanted to outline what that process is. And so it's sort of, in some sense, it's similar to like Neuroimage and whatever, but there's, I don't know if you wanted to discuss it or I can discuss it yeah, it's basically right. I mean, you have an editor-in-chief and you have your senior editors or now we have one layer, we might get two layers, but the editors, and the editor-in-chief gets the paper, or Kay gets it, sends it to the editor-in-chief. They decide on what editor is most relevant to this paper. Initially, we had just talked about flipping that. We had played with the idea of having just the papers there, and the editors get to choose what they have. But maybe that will come in the future. Who knows? But right now the editors choose it, and then they pick reviewers, and they get the reviews, they iterate with that, and then they send it back to the editor-in-chief. I don't know if you want to add any more to that.
Kay, do you want to add anything to that? I mean, it goes first to Kay, who kind of does the initial run through about everything, and
yeah. And you check for, and we want to check for, things like plagiarism and
completeness. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Making sure the submission is all complete. A lot of it is like our system is not ideal, but that's just because of the limitations we're working with the intending interactive platform that was discussed earlier. So some of the ideas like having a pool where handling editors can choose, having Tonya be able to freely access all the submissions at one time. These are temporary glitches in the system, if you will, pain points that are, we're continuing to work through. But at the moment, yes, the submission comes through me, and then I hand it off to Tonya, and then Tonya assigns a handling editor. And then if you want to get technical, it comes back to me, and then I hand it to the handling editor, and then the handling editor decides a peer reviewer, and then it goes back to me, and then I give it to the peer reviewer. So it's a lot of analog, very, very analog system at the moment.
Yeah, and hopefully a lot of those processes
for
the platform, it's streamlined. Yeah, go on, Tonya. You're gonna.
I would say one of the advantages of moving to a different system is hopefully to remove some of these this work that Kay would have to do, because it's automated, and many of the editorial manager systems available through other have these automatic processes where it goes directly from the handling editors to the people who are reviewing. But at this stage, they go back and forth a lot through Kay. And so we're working on cloning her.
Yeah.
And can I just add one quick thing? Like people sometimes ask, if you're publishing data and code, and where are those things going to be hosted, really? And we decided not to have like something specific in Aperture for that, because that's cost to maintain and to build and all those things. there are a number of very good platforms where those objects can be hosted. Like think of code, I mean, like GitHub is one of the obvious place, or if you're thinking like neuroimaging data, it could be an open neuro data set, or so all those platforms, we're kind of like thinking of, okay, what are the good platforms that are long-term sustainable, that that are solid, all those things, and listing those things, and our publications are really pointing to those places, as long as they are, again, they must have some quality and long-lasting aspect and sustainability aspect. You can't put your research object on any place. So we are looking at where are the good places. But our publication really points to those things. That's maybe one of the specificity of Aperture.
Yeah, I think that that's probably one of the things that's most exciting, is the flexibility and ingenuity of the Aperture Oversight Committee, and Tonya as well, to make this work. Tonya describes the current system as kind of a duct tape solution, which I think is a really good metaphor. And something that JB and Nicola have always said is that Aperture currently works as a wrapper. So while we can't necessarily support uploads of data, of PDFs at this time, we have ways to still publish them and make this work. So I think that has just been so impressive, watching all these different solutions make it work for people and authors who want to see these things published and who want to have a place for them.
Yeah. I mean, it's been really stimulating discussions for the last couple of years on what to do and how to do it. And we're, there's still things that aren't fully worked out. Like, I don't know if you want to discuss something, the issue of like reviewing code. That's a tricky thing. How do you do that? How do you find people? There's certain people who just want to review code. What do you review it for? What level? What depth? I don't know if you wanted to talk about that a little bit, either JB or Tonya. What's the plan as far as reviewing code? What can people expect?
I don't know, Tonya, do you want to say a word? Or
I'll start. Maybe you can fill in. How's that?
Okay.
So, because we've thought of this, we've actually asked the handling editors, are they interested in handling code? And we had, I would say, almost about 50%, maybe it's 40%, who are actually interested in saying, I'd like to handle code. The approach of how we're going to do this is not completely worked out yet, but I'd like to envision, maybe based on the hackathon, that there could be some way that this could be done as a team, and actually in conversation with the people who have developed the code as needed. So there's different levels of how you can analyze code. I mean, you can make sure it runs, it does what it does. You can go through it line by line. Or you can just look at the PDF and say, this looks like a good thing, but I'm not going to go through. To me, if you're reviewing code, there should be some quality check to make sure that it does what it says it's going to do. And that is time consuming. So, JB, do you have anything to add to this?
No, not really. I think, I mean, people, I think people asking, how do you review code are sometimes people that have not developed code, right? And if you have actually, work on a software package, on things like that, people have a much better idea of, okay, what they should be looking at. And obviously it's going to be like a process of how, what are we looking at exactly. But I'm sure, this is not, I don't think that's very different from reviewing like a PD, like a story where you have like a prior information on the states of things, and you want to, and finding the, what is quality and what is not quality, or like, so basically, I mean, is the code tested? Is it well documented? Is it is it solid? Like, there's a number of things, and also, is it correct? Like, if we can, how is it easy to check that it is correct? And so all those things, I think, will come naturally to people that have the experience. obviously it's going to be a learning process of how we do that. But remember also that there are journals that are specifically publishing code, and for instance the Journal of Open Software, and so we can learn from those journals as well, and say, okay, those are the recommendations for our reviewers, and yes, it's going to be a learning process, and and as often reviewing things, it's some of it's going to be noisy as well, and we have to acknowledge that.
Yeah. We'll see if someone eventually submits something in Fortran or something and see what happens.
Yeah, and also, of course, code gets updated, and it's a tricky thing to sort of, we'll probably have it time stamped or version stamped, so that one could potentially upload it and then have various versions added to it. This is sort of code is potentially a living document that we can continue to timestamp. I mean, one can imagine a publishing platform where you publish the base code and then allow for updates to be published along with that code with timestamps.
I think that happens naturally in packages, like there's a version 1, version 2, and those things can be tagged. While one of the difficulty I should mention, and I'm just mentioning that because it's an often like it's a problem that is not very well dealt with, I think, so far, but and their way of developing solution is the acknowledgement of contributors of code. Let's say there's a publication aspect on the code, and there's a code review on the specific version with a specific number of contributors, and then other contributors, so maintaining the contributors list and pointing to the contributors list in the publication is one way of making sure that the contributions are acknowledged for code, for software or code or object.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an ongoing challenge, and I think it's definitely something that will evolve like everything else. And I think that we're very flexible as far as that's concerned. And that sort of brings me to sort of the thought of, certainly we talk about publishing code, publishing data, which is also another challenge to review as well. And certainly having links, and we're not hosting the data, we're having links to the servers for the data. And, we'll have certain standards in how it's organized and how it's, what its format is and things like that. So what people sometimes have confronted me about with Aperture, and this is a sort of a challenging question as well, is okay, so you have this, and so, what really how is Aperture really different than any journal out there? And I think we've all sort of talked about this already, that it is completely open access, and it encourages everything from editorials to regular PDFs of papers to data, to code, and to link these in some way. And also obviously maintaining a certain high quality, and that's what we want to maintain. So in that sense, it's worth it, I think, to consider Aperture as far as a publishing platform. I don't know if you wanted to add to what makes Aperture different than any option out there. People come to me and say, "Oh, why can't I just post it on a pre-publishing server platform, and like BioArchive or whatever, and just leave it there and whatever, or just throw it up on GitHub and whatever." And so what does Aperture, what value, what's unique about Aperture as opposed to all the other journals? And also it ties into the whole OHBM community, but what in your mind is unique about it as far as that's concerned? That, we've already mentioned a lot of things, but sort of just to crystallize what makes it different and worth thinking about.
Tonya, do you want to answer that, or are you asking me? Peter?
Both you and Tonya.
Okay.
And Kay as well. Whoever wants to chime in.
It's kind of multifactorial, isn't it? Because it's not just one thing. It's the combination of the many things that make it unique. And if you just look at one thing, it's not different. So, I mean, if you look at the cost for publishing, it's probably about a third of the cost, because we're nonprofit, we're not making money. But that, in combination with high quality, so it's you have to put all the different variables into the equation, and then you come up and say, oh, it's multifactorial, and that's what makes it different.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Like so in my mind, I always had like those 5 pillars of Aperture: the openness, the non-profit aspect that you mentioned, Tonya, which we're not here to make money. The very high quality. I think that's really is critical for the success of the enterprise. The diversity of the objects, and also I would say hopefully the diversity of the people, and the fact that we are community driven. We are the main sponsor and the main organizers are our society, where we elect people and at the head of the society. So those 5 things, combination of those 5 things, to me is the thing that makes Aperture unique.
Yeah, and you mentioned briefly the cost of publishing, so that's an important point. Right now, I think, what is it? We're charging $1,000, but to publish, nothing to review, nothing to submit.
If you're a non-member.
If you're a non-member.
1,000 for non-members, and 800 for members.
Okay, and that's pretty low. That's pretty achievable by most labs.
Considering what I heard, Nature and Science are going to start charging.
yeah, there's all kinds of, right, it gets high, and that actually, it's interesting. It's an interesting question of the whole idea of open access. The big journals are saying, okay, we'll be open access, but we'll charge this huge amount. And so what's really better, having a paywall or preventing labs from publishing because it's too expensive? That's a tricky thing. So hopefully we're trying to just lower the barrier of the access. And of course, there's all these exceptions we can make, just like OHBM makes exceptions for signing up for the meeting. If there's underprivileged countries or things like that, there's exceptions that can be made. So. Okay. All right. So maybe we'll start wrapping up here. But so how do you? So what do you envision as the long-term future of Aperture? How can you envision? How do you? Let's just try to stick our necks out a little bit. Maybe like Aperture in 5 years. What will it look like? What do you think? So it's a risky thing because it can go wildly different directions. It's a lot of unknowns, a lot of tiny things that might make a huge difference that we don't know about. But at least for myself, I have a vision that maybe we'll have up to several hundred submissions a year, and we'll be completely sustainable. So much so that we can lower, if we're totally sustainable, we can lower our application fee, our submission fee, or our publication fee. Who knows? And I think it will enhance. Not only Aperture will grow, but my feeling is that it will substantially will provide more of a structure for the whole OHBM society. It will be kind of very symbiotic with the meetings. When people publish abstracts or talks and meetings, the Aperture will be one of the first places they think about for submitting their paper, and it'll just be this very good sort of relationship as far as that's concerned. So I don't know what you guys think of as far as that. What's your vision for 5 years from now? It's anything different? Anything to worry about? Anything to?
I
go ahead, Tonya.
Yeah, no, I echo a lot of what you say in terms of it's going to be one of the, I would hope in 5 years, one of the primary imaging journals that people think about when they say, okay, I have this paper, where am I going to send it? And they think of a number of journals for neuroimaging journals, and they say, Aperture, I think it fits for Aperture probably because everything fits for Aperture. And that it will have an impact factor, and the impact factor, so I don't want to give I'll give what I hope it'll be then. I hope it'll be between 4 and 5 in 5 years. That's what I would hope for. JB wants it higher, and I actually want it higher too. But you never know. If you're also accepting high quality papers that are replication papers, they may not be cited as much as other ones. So certainly there's tricks that publishers do to increase impact factors. And those are things that we won't necessarily do because we're focusing on quality and other things. So it would be nice to have high quality, but what I would like is that people think about it as one of the top imaging journals that they could send it to of an assortment of imaging journals. I don't think we're going to take over the entire market in 5 years.
Yeah.
10? No, just kidding.
But it's interesting. We were just before this podcast, we were just talking about impact factor, and it's interesting because I think OHBM, sort of taps into the same community that Neuroimaging and HBM, human brain mapping, tap into, and they have impact factors around 5, 6, 7 sometimes, depending on how you think about it. Some years, and also because the journal is, of course we publish, we encourage findings, but also, a lot of methods papers, especially if the code is available and everything, and it's very useful, it'll be, those have high amounts of citations. So maybe, who knows, it could be even higher depending on the size. I mean, as the OHBM community grows, we have, 3,000 people attending the meeting at least, and then, a much wider group that cares about neuroimaging. So
I kind of agree. I mean, that's first of all, I don't like impact factor as a measure. It's if we could get rid of that. We really do want to have like a very high quality, right? And we've seen that there are many initiatives in the publishing world that are open but not very high quality, and we want to avoid that sort of like that trap of so high quality means like a high recognition for objects that are not traditional objects. I think that's I would hope that Aperture would be the place for, people thinking, oh, this is more than just like a story. This is a whole body of work and somehow we're going to be more selective in some ways. If if we're asking for, hey, where are the data, where are the code, it's going to be selective, right? Because not everyone would be doing all that work. So I'm hoping that people will think of Aperture as, okay, this is the place where things can be reusable easily. I can take an Aperture publication of objects and really rely on it and reuse it and go faster in the research and go more efficiently. So that's I think if we have that sort of ideas in the mind of all our community of researchers, both at OHBM first, our society, but also beyond, in the future. I think I'm hoping for that success. I think it will work because that's something that we need. So yeah, let's make it happen.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that we're almost wrapping up. Are there any additional thoughts or perspectives or things to say that any of you wanted to add as far as that's concerned?
Can I just add one shameless plug for the OHBM members who are currently working on high quality articles to consider submitting it to Aperture. We are open for business, and if you think this could go to Nature, could go to Science, but they're going to charge like excessively amounts of money. So how about Aperture?
Yeah, it's going to be well recognized as a high quality platform for sure. Yeah.
That's my one shameless plug.
Okay. Yeah. No, I'm all behind that as well, and I'm already thinking of papers to submit myself to Aperture, and we'll keep it going. All right. Well,
and I'm working.
Yes. Yeah. So well, thank you, Tonya, JB, Kay, for joining me and helping myself, getting this OHBM podcast off the ground as well with this. This is a perfect start. It's near and dear to my heart, and hopefully this also will continue as well, and keep on growing. So, and who knows, maybe, well, thank you. And maybe in a couple of years, we'll come back to Aperture and have an update. So
that'd be great. And I should say thank you. It's been fun and really exciting to work on this with you, Peter, and Tonya, and Kay, and I think it's been a great group of people as well. So that the human enterprise was fantastic as well. So thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
It's been great working with you all, and
Okay, thanks. And we'll keep on getting more and more busy too. So, all right. Well, thank you. And I think with that, I'll sign off. All right.